مساء الخير جميعا
Good evening to
وحياكم
all
الله في
and greetings to you. God's
جلسة
blessings and
الميلاد
greetings
الجديد آفاق
in
عالم ما بعد
the
كورونا
10th session and the
في
rebirth
الملتقى
prospects
السابع
for the post-corona
لمنتدى
world.
تعزيز
In
السلم.
this 7th
معكم
meeting
سليمان الهتلان
of the
رئيس
Forum for
التنفيذي
Promoting
لشركة
Peace
هتلان
in
ميديا.
Muslim Society.
يشرفني
My
إدارة
name is
هذه
Sulaiman
الجلسة
Hatlan.
مع
I'm the
نخبة
founder and CEO of
من
Hatlan Media,
المفكرين وأصحاب
and I'm
الخبرات
joined
والتجارب
with
في
an elite
القضايا
group of people
الفكرية
who have
في
experience and
حوارات الأديان
understanding
في
and have
مناقشة قضايا تهم
participated in a
الإنسانية
number of
بشكل عام.
dialogues, interfaith.
أصحاب السمو والمعالي
So,
والسعادة، الحضور الكريم،
Your
أرحب
Excellencies,
بكم
ladies and
من
gentlemen,
جديد
I
في هذه الجلسة من
welcome you
جلسات
once
الملتقى
again.
السابع لمنتدى تعزيز السلم في
It
المجتمعات
is the
المسلمة،
10th session
والذي
of this
يعقد
forum,
برعاية كريمة من سمو
which
الشيخ
is
عبد
under
الله
the
بن زايد
auspices
آل
of Sheikh
نهيان،
Abdullah bin Zayed Al
وزير
Nahyan,
الخارجية والتعاون
the foreign
الدولي
minister
بدولة الإمارات العربية
of the
المتحدة،
UAE and the
تحت
Minister of
شعار
Cooperation.
قيم عالم ما
This
بعد
session is
كورونا،
entitled Rebirth
التضامن
Prospects for
وروح
the
ركاب
Post-Corona
السفينة، وهو
World.
شعار يعبر
And
بصدق
the
عن
motto and
حال جميع
slogan
دول
of
العالم في
this
ظل
meeting
انتشار
is reviving
جائحة
virtues in the times of
COVID-19.
Corona.
فنحن في سفينة
So
واحدة،
we are all in one ship,
وعلينا أن نتكاتف معا،
and we
بل
have
لا
to
خيار أمامنا
work
سوى
together,
العمل معا حتى
and
نصل
that's
إلى
our only
البر
choice
بسلام.
to get to the shore of safety.
السيدات والسادة،
Ladies and gentlemen,
يقول معالي الشيخ عبد الله بن بية رئيس
Sheikh
منتدى
Abdullah bin
تعزيز السلم
Baya,
في المجتمعات
the
المسلمة،
president of the Forum for Promoting
يقول إن
Peace in Muslim
الجائحة
Society,
أكدت
says
المصير
that this
المشترك للبشرية،
pandemic has reaffirmed
وأننا لم نكن
this
في
common
يوم من
destiny of
الأيام أكثر
humanity, and
ترابطاً
we've never
ولا
been
تواصلاً منا
ever
اليوم،
before in need
لأنها
of
هدمت كل
this
نظريات الفصل أو
cooperation
التمييز
and solidarity,
على أساس
because this has
العرق
shown
أو
us
اللغة
that there's no
أو
difference
التنمية،
between us
وكشفت
and
الحقيقة
there's
الخالدة،
nothing to
وهي ضعف
make us
الإنسان
stand alone,
واحتياجه
be it
لأخيه
on the basis
الإنسان.
of religion or race or
الحضور
gender.
الكريم،
Ladies and
تركز
gentlemen,
هذه الجلسة
this
بعنوان الميلاد
session,
الجديد، آفاق عالم ما بعد كورونا،
which
تركز على
is
التفكير
looking
في
at the
وجهة
rebirth and the
جديدة
prospects
وروح
for the
جديدة
post-corona
للإنسانية
world,
تستقبل بها
on
مرحلة ما بعد الأزمة،
how we are going
وهي
to
مرحلة
deal
مفتوحة على أسوأ
with each other
الاحتمالات
post the
وأفضلها في آن
coronavirus.
واحد. فمؤشرات
There
كل
are
مرحلة
indicators
أو فمؤشرات كل من الاحتمالين حاضرة،
of
لكنها مرحلة
being
تختزل
saved
بالتأكيد
or
فرصاً
otherwise.
عظيمة
However,
لصنع
there are
عالم
great
أفضل
opportunities for
ومجتمع
us
إنساني أمثل،
to form
وما
a
هذا
better
الملتقى
future
إلا
for
نموذج
humanity.
لما يمكن
And here in this area,
للثقافات
we are only
المختلفة
an example of what could
للمجتمعات
happen
المتنوعة أن تناقش
if there's
وأن
cooperation and
تتكاتف من
discussion
أجل
between
هذا
the
المستقبل.
diverse communities to
يسعدني
discuss
أن
what will
أرحب
happen in our
بضيوف
future.
هذه الجلسة،
It gives me pleasure
بداية
to
بالحاخام
welcome
إفرايم ميرفيس،
the speakers in this
وهو
session,
الحاخام
and I will
الأكبر
start with the Chief
لبريطانيا
Rabbi
والكومنولث،
Ephraim,
شغل سابقا
Chief
منصب
Rabbi
كبير
of
الحاخامات
Britain
في
and the
إيرلندا،
Commonwealth in the UK,
وحاخام معبد ماربل آرك
and
ومعبد
he
ومعابد
is also the
فينشلي في لندن.
Rabbi of
يعد
Marble Arch and
الممثل الأساسي
Finchley's
للجالية اليهودية في
synagogue,
الحكومة والأديان الأخرى
representing
والمجتمع المدني.
the Jewish
ويعتبر
faith in the
الحاخام
UK,
إفرايم ميرفيس الصوت الأبرز
and
في
he is
المجتمع
considered
اليهودي في المملكة المتحدة،
the
وأحد
main
أهم
voice and
قادة
speaker in the
الرأي
United
العام،
Kingdom and one
عرف
of the leaders of forming
بمبادراته
the
في
public
مجال
opinion in
تعزيز
the UK.
علاقات التفاهم بين
He
الأديان
has a lot of
وتبني قيم
contribution in
التسامح
terms
والسلام.
of working towards
أيضا
compassion and
معنا الدكتور الأب فادي
tolerance
الضوء،
around the world. We
رئيس
also
مؤسسة
have
أديان
Dr.
وأستاذ
Fadi
الفلسفة
Dao,
الأساسية
who
والجيوسياسية
is the
الدينية، وهو
chairman
حاصل
of the
على
CEO
درجة
and the founder of
الدكتوراه
Adyan
في
Foundation from Lebanon,
اللاهوت
and he
ودرجة
has a
ما قبل الدكتوراه
PhD
في
in
الفلسفة السياسية
theology.
من جامعة
Before that, he
ستراسبورغ في
had
فرنسا،
a degree from
ويدرس الآن في
Strasbourg
جامعة الروح
University in
القدس
political
اللبنانية.
philosophy,
هو
and
أيضا أستاذ زائد
he is a
وعضو
teacher
أكاديمي ومستشار في
in
العديد من
the Holy
المؤسسات في
Spirit in
أوروبا والعالم العربي.
Lebanon.
أرحب أيضا
I
بالدكتورة
also
آمنة
welcome
حوتي، المديرة
Dr.
التنفيذية
Amina Houti,
لمركز الحوار والعمل
the
والمؤسسة المشاركة
Chief
للمركز
Executive
الأول لدراسة العلاقات
of
بين
Gems
المسلمين
and
واليهود في
Jewels,
كامبريدج ومركز
and
الحوار، حاصلة
also
على درجة
part of the
الدكتوراه في
Religious
الأنثروبولوجيا الاجتماعية من جامعة
Council
كامبريدج، وهي
of
صاحبة
Pakistan.
كتاب الأحجار الكريمة
She has
والمجوهرات
written
أديان باكستان.
a book under
شاركت في
the name
المنتدى
Gems and
الدولي
Jewels in
لقيادة التعليم
Pakistan.
العالي بين الأديان.
She also
الدكتور
participates
كيني جيمس
in
كلارك زميل
formulating
أبحاث أول
policies
في معهد
for higher
كوفمان
education in
بين الأديان
Pakistan.
بجامعة جراند فالي ستيت ميشيغان.
And the
حاصل على
next guest is
الدكتوراه من
Dr. Kelly
جامعة
James Clark, who's a
نوتردام،
senior
وشغل
researcher
مناصب
and a
أحدية في
fellow at
جامعات
Grand Valley
أكسفورد
State
وسانت
University, USA.
أندروز ونوتردام.
He has
معنا
also
أيضا
received
فضيلة
degrees
الدكتور
from other
طارق أوبرو،
universities,
إمام المسجد الجامع ببوردو
together
ومفكر
with
فرنسي شهير.
Dr.
يعرف
Tariq
فضيلة الإمام طارق
Ubru,
أوبرو بدوره البارز
who is a famous
وتأثيره الإيجابي في
thinker
الرأي
and an
العام
intellectual,
المسلم
and he
في
has
فرنسا وأوروبا
participated
من خلال أنشطته
positively
الريادية
to
وكتاباته التي
the
تدعو إلى صياغة
enlightenment
تجديدية
about the role
للخطاب
of
الديني
Muslims in
في
Europe,
سياق الجمهورية الفرنسية،
and
ومن
also
أشهر
has
كتبه
participated in a
دعوة
number
من أجل
of
المصالحة.
writings in France and a call for reconciliation between Muslims
السيدات
and
والسادة،
the people of France.
تتناول
Ladies and
هذه
gentlemen,
الجلسة ثلاث محاور رئيسية.
this session
نبدأ
will deal with
بموضوعنا الأول
three
نحو
axes. We
إنسانية
start with the first topic,
جديدة، التفكير
entitled
بروح
Towards a New Humanity,
جديدة،
Thought Inspired by New Spirit.
وأذكر المتحدثين الكرام
And I remind
بضرورة
the
قدر
kind
المستطاع لو سمحتوا
speakers
جميعا
to, as much as
الالتزام
possible, stick
بوقت
to
هذه
the
الجلسة.
allotted
نعطي
time for them
بحدود
to
10
speak,
دقائق لكل
and I
متحدث،
shall give each
وأيضا
speaker
لمتابعينا
about
الكرام
10
سواء
minutes. And
على
for
السوشيال
those who
ميديا
are
بكل
following us, be it on the
أشكالها،
social
بأننا
media
سنسعد
or any
بتلقي
other means,
أسئلتهم
I would
ملاحظاتهم.
like to
لعل
tell
الوقت
them that
يسعفنا
we
لمشاركة
are
هذه
very
الأسئلة
happy
أو
to
هذه
receive
الملاحظات أو هذه
your
المقترحات
comments,
مع المتحدثين الكرام.
interventions,
نبدأ حديثنا هذه
proposals,
الليلة
suggestions,
مع
etc.
الحاخام فرايم
And we shall be
ميرفيس.
pleased to deal with it.
فليتفضل.
We shall first start with the Chief Rabbi Ephraim Mervis. Sir, you have the floor.
Your Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, at the outset, I would like to apologize to my fellow panelists that immediately after my talk, I will need to leave because of some pressing commitments, particularly prior to our Hanukkah festival. I would like to start my address with words of congratulations to the leadership of the United Arab Emirates, and in particular, the President, His Highness, Sheikh Khalifa bin Zayed Al Nahyan. The Abraham Accords, which he was party to, between the United Arab Emirates and the State of Israel, are not only an agreement between two countries, they are also a significant development between two great faiths, Islam and Judaism. And for this, I applaud the United Arab Emirates, and together we celebrate not just what has been achieved, but far more significantly, what can now be achieved in the wake of these accords. I would also like to congratulate Sheikh Abdullah bin Baya for his leadership and vision, for his creation of the Alliance of Virtue, and for his role in establishing and hosting this forum. There is a beautiful spirit of peace which is evident here throughout the forum. According to Jewish teaching, nothing is of greater value than shalom, which is peace. We are encouraged by our sages to love peace and to pursue it. And it is for this very reason that it is my enormous delight and pleasure to play this role in this significant forum. In our tradition, we draw for inspiration on the biblical passage of the week in question. And this week in synagogue, we are reading from Genesis chapter 35, in which there is a great story of tragedy and loss. Rachel is just about to give birth, Her husband Jacob, of course, was to father many children, but Rachel was just to be the mother of two. And as she was giving birth to her second child, she was dying, and she knew that the child would survive. And just before she drew in her very last breath, she had a dying wish. It was the name to be given to that child. She called him Ben-Oni, meaning son of my sorrow. But immediately afterwards, once she had died, Jacob changed the name of the child to become Benjamin, meaning son of my right hand. How could he have disregarded that final dying wish of the wife he loved so much? The explanation is as follows. Had the child grown up to live a life as Ben-Oni, son of sorrow, he would continuously be immersed in the drama relating to his birth. He would continuously be taken back to his origins of pain, of suffering, origins of loss. He would probably have a negative outlook within a challenging world. Jacob didn't want that for his child. Instead, Jacob wanted his child to recognize the sadness and the pain of his origins, but to emerge from that period with strength. Son of right hand, Benjamin, is an indication of strength, so that not only would he derive strength, but he would be a source of strength for his people and for the world, with positivity and optimism to face a challenging world. And that's exactly what Benjamin did. He became a vehicle through which his divided family became united, a symbol of peace, optimism, and positivity. And I believe that this is the biblical advice for us right now as we are starting to emerge forwards towards our post-COVID era. Yesterday, we celebrated in the United Kingdom when the very first vaccines were given. The light at the end of the COVID-19 tunnel is now visible. And we should not emerge from COVID-19 as being the global children of sorrow, taking with us the tragedy of the pandemic. And the tragedy is so evident. So many people have passed away. So many people have been ill and are ill. So many people have lost their income. So many people are feeling alone. And there are serious mental health issues. But together with that, we notice the silver lining to these very dark, tragic clouds. Spirituality is on the increase within our challenged world. And most significantly of all, the pandemic is sending a very strong message to all of humankind. And the message is, we're all on the same side. You see, the virus is our invisible enemy, and the virus does not differentiate between people of different genders, people of different faiths, people of different races. The virus does not recognize borders. As far as the virus is concerned, we are all on the same side. God Almighty is conveying that message to us, that further to this pandemic, we need to emerge as a united team of people on earth. We are all on the same side. We need to work towards peace and unity. And I believe that there are 5 important lessons emerging from this, particularly for Muslims and Jews. The first relates to what we call mishpacha, which is family. If the whole world is all on the same side within that world, Muslims and Jews are part of the same family. And when you are part of the same family, you can often have differences of opinion. You can express different views and outlooks, but because you live under one roof, then you get on well together because you have a very close blood bond through which you always know that you're part of the same entity and you will move forward constructively. And that surely must be the guiding path for us to follow. We are mishpacha, within everybody being on the same side. We are part of the same family, having the same common ancestry. Point number 2 relates to dialogue. You can only have peace when people are speaking to each other. In the absence of communication, there is simply no hope for peace. Dialogue is crucially important for us, even to raise the difficult questions and to discuss issues which sometimes divide us. We need to talk, we need to engage in dialogue. Number 3, anti-Semitism and Islamophobia. We have to guarantee that there will be no room at all in any place nor in any sphere for anti-Semitism, and similarly for Islamophobia. Hatred of this kind can only bring about conflict. Number 4, the role of leaders, a particularly important element for us to be aware of. This is the time for courage. In my own experience, in interfaith dialogue and particularly in engagement between Jews and Muslims here in the UK and at a global level, I have been privileged often to engage in dialogue with truly outstanding representatives of Islam. Wonderful people. People who are willing to put their heads above the parapet. However, often, far too often, there have been many leaders of Islam who have not been willing to have the courage and who've instead have stayed behind or held conversations only in private. And I have understood this and I have respected this. But I believe that now there is a new spirit, and there is a spirit in which for 2 reasons we need to openly engage. First of all, because of COVID-19, as I said before, we are all on the same side and we need to be seen to be on that same side, and particularly within our special family. Secondly, in the wake of the historic Abraham Accords, we have now seen what can come about when people bravely engage in conversation and dialogue. You need to be patient. It doesn't all happen overnight, but eventually it leads towards some very significant and historic events. And as a result, we as leaders need to have that courage. Jewish leaders need to guide their communities. Muslim leaders need to guide their communities. And when it comes to leadership, it mustn't only be apparent that right at the top of the pyramid of interfaith activity, there is that element of togetherness. It needs to filter down to the grassroots. So it's not just major heads of faith, but we need our rabbis, our imams to be engaged in dialogue. And we need to encourage the members of our respective communities to engage in dialogue, because it's only when you speak to each other that you can indeed encourage peace and unity to prevail. The United Arab Emirates Abrahamic House of Fraternity Initiative is an excellent example of how in the public square a brave and great statement can be made about togetherness of people of different faiths. I then come to my 5th and probably most significant point to highlight. It's called tolerance. But actually, while we all know what tolerance is, I believe that tolerance is not good enough. You see, the English word tolerance comes from the Latin, which means to bear or to endure. Similarly, the Hebrew word for tolerance is sovlanut. Lisbol means to suffer. And this is the case as well in many other languages, indicating that tolerance conveys the impression, I don't like this at all. I'm not comfortable with this person. I'm totally opposed, but you know what? I will give them the space in which to have their voice, and I will suffer while they'll do it. I will tolerate it. It's not good enough. In Arabic, there is a far better word. It is tasamuh. Tasamuh implies mutual acceptance and understanding. Tasamuh inspires people to have that element of understanding and cooperation and dialogue, which will then in the course of time promote affection and love. And that is what we need, not just mere tolerance. Let me now return to another lesson from our biblical portion of the week in the book of Genesis. Jacob was just about to meet up with his twin brother Esau, whom he knew sought to take his life. In anticipation of that epic moment The Bible says, Vayira Yaakov ma'od vayetzer lo. Jacob was afraid and he was sorely distressed. And our sources ask, why is it necessary to tell us both? He was afraid and he was sorely distressed. If he was afraid, it's because he was distressed. And if he was distressed, he must have been afraid. So Jewish tradition teaches as follows. Jacob was afraid lest he be killed, and he was sorely distressed lest he be forced to kill. Jacob recognized that where there is conflict, there can be no winners. And where there is peace, everyone is a winner. And that is a lesson that we now post-COVID need to carry with us, to promote peace and understanding and to have unity. And let's not mistake unity for uniformity. There are some people who believe that actually it's uniformity that's necessary. Uniformity is when everybody looks the same, says the same, has the same view, has the same belief. That's not what we should be aspiring to. Rather, we should respect the right of people and groups and faiths to have their own identity, their own belief. And we will give honor to them for what they believe in. And unity is achieved when we respect each other and harmoniously we walk together alongside each other, providing the opportunity for each one to express themselves in their own way. That is unity. And where there are attempts to achieve uniformity, that is what will end in failure for all of mankind. We therefore now have a very exciting opportunity. It's a great opportunity for Muslims and for Jews. It's a great opportunity post-COVID for all of humankind. Let us never forget that we are all on the same side. And in this way, may God Almighty bless us all with peace, with unity, with success, and good health. Thank you very much.
شكرا جزيلا للحاخام إفرايم ميرفيس على هذه الملاحظات وعلى مشاركته لبعض الدروس لكل الإنسانية، دروس فيروس كورونا، حينما قال الفيروس لا يفرق.
Thank you very much to the Rabbi, and he reminded us of the lessons we are learning from the coronavirus pandemic. I have a very good item of news for yours, because I am very pleased to say that His Eminence Sheikh Abdullah bin Bayyah, the head of the forum, is attending with us in this session. And we always aspire and look forward to listen to him, and we are looking forward to it. So in this session, he knows this, and I personally always look forward to what he will present, what he will tell us. And I would hope that he will be able to join us and have an intervention, even with very short notes, Your Eminence. I wanted in this special session to greet you, to say hello to all of you. My brother, the moderator of this session, Dr. Hatlan, is a brother of mine, and also my friends, Chief Rabbi of the United Kingdom, Chief Rabbi Ephraim Mervis, and he actually spoke 2 or 3 days ago. We had a conversation, himself and myself, and we are continuing this conversation now. And I would like to greet you all and support you all and to encourage you all. And I hope that this dialogue, this discussion will continue. And I believe that all of you, and especially Dr. Tarek Obro also, was playing a great role in dialogue, and in France, of course, especially. It's also very good to see our brother and friend, Dr. Fadi Daou,
أقول فقط كلمة واحدة هي أن أهم شيء
I
هو
would like
أن
to
لا
simply say
يتتبع
one
القرآن
thing.
من بعض.
The most important thing is that we never despair of one another. This is what
قال لهم ولا تيأسوا
Job
من
told
روح
his
الله.
children,
وقد أرسلهم يبحثون عن بنيامين
and
الذي
he
كان
sent them
مع
out to
يوسف
look
عليه
for
السلام.
Benjamin,
فقال
and he
ولا
said,
تيأسوا من روح الله إنه لا
don't
ييأس من روح
despair
الله
of
إلا القوم الكافرون.
God's spirit. It's only the infidels who do
وصية
despair
يعقوب
of God's spirit.
لأبنائه التي جاءت
And this is the recommendation
لبداية الحوار.
of Job to his children, which is mentioned in the Quran. This is the most important thing when we start our dialogues and conversations, that we must start with open hearts, and we must never despair of one another. We must never give up on one another. So I'm very hopeful that this dialogue will bear good fruits, and especially in the current circumstances of this very challenge to humanity because of the pandemic. So thank you very much, and it's a pleasure to see you today, and I will continue to listen to you all from behind the curtain, let's say, and if I may. Thank you very much. Peace be upon you, Sheikh bin Baya. We are very pleased to hear your intervention. And as you said, we must never give up on one another. We must dialogue with open hearts. This is a golden rule, a golden advice for every dialogue, every project of dialogue and humanitarian project that seeks to develop dialogue and openness to all, to one another. Thank you then. Let's return to our schedule for this session, and I'm very pleased to invite Father Fadi Dao to contribute with us to this session. Please go ahead, sir. Thank you, Dr. Hatlan, and God's peace be upon you all. And we thank, of course, the Forum for promoting peace in Muslim societies, and of course its president, His Eminence Sheikh bin Baya. It is a wonderful coincidence, in fact, that the 7th Forum is being held at a time when we are all facing the corona pandemic, and we have the good news of the vaccine. So we can now look forward to the world post-corona and have this title of Value of Post-Corona, Values in the Post-Corona World, and Solidarity and the Spirit of the Ship Passengers. It's a coincidence that prompts me to ask, has this vaccine become the only hope for entering a post-corona world? Well, the answer may be in the affirmative, if we consider that the only problem that today's world faces is this health crisis. It obviously will not be resolved unless we eliminate the virus, or at least sufficiently limit its spread and find appropriate treatments for it. However, we all know that the corona pandemic has revealed that there are other unhealthy epidemics, not ones in the health field, but they are no less dangerous. And I have selected 3 of them to describe the context in which we all live and to draw the contours of the possible post-war, post-corona world we all seek to establish. Number 1 is corona and the environment that we're all giving to, the break we're all giving to the environment. Now, in light of the first wave of the pandemic, we've observed, has been observed, that birds started to chirp again in Wuhan, in China, that the skies of Beirut have turned blue because pollution had ended, and that fish have returned to enjoy waters of the canals of Venice. Now, we would all be happy, of course, would rejoice that the earth is breathing again and that the environment is taking a rest and is giving us something of its authentic beauty and freshness. And that people are giving it a break and are forced, in fact, to stop their activities and quarantine themselves in their homes for fear of this so-called hidden enemy that is waiting in ambush for them. In his message concerning caring for our common home, which means the earth, Pope Francis, in 2015, stated that our common home is also like a sister to us, with whom we share our existence. And she's also a beautiful mother who embraces us in her arms. This sister is protesting the harm we're inflicting on her. And he continues, because of our irresponsible abuse of the goods and the blessings that God gave us through this earth. We all grew up believing that it's our property, it belongs to us, and we're in control of it, and it's permissible for us to plunder it. Pope Francis considered that the violence dwelling in the human heart, wounded by sin, also appears through the symptoms of disease that we observe in the soil, in the water, in the air, and in all living beings today. Now, what's interesting in this text of the Pope is that he linked the pain of the earth with the pain of the poor. And he's expressed his awareness that the true solution to the environmental issue is inseparable from social justice and the alleviation of human suffering. Therefore, Pope Francis denounces the position of those who think in terms of the luxury of an evolution and a quality of life beyond the reach of most of the Earth's inhabitants. This lack of sensory communication that we're having today, this lack of encounter, means we are numbing our conscience and ignoring some of the realities through partial analysis here and there, working in silos. In his opinion, it all results in a romantic discourse that is useless in advocating for the environment and the fairness for all humanity. Thus, in this post-corona world, we are required, all of us, to hear the cry of the earth and the cry of the poor, both cries alike. And this calls upon us to lay new political foundations for our relations to this earth, and we all need it. We must combine human and economic and ecological development with environmental development. And only this struggle for comprehensive and sustainable development can create peace between humankind and the earth. The second point is corona and the hidden diversity. Observers have pointed out to the large number of victims of the corona pandemic who are of Somali origins in Sweden. Now, they form a ratio that is inconsistent with their share of the total population in Sweden. In the first month of the outbreak, 40% of its victims in the capital, Stockholm, were of Somali origin. And for the whole country, they were 18%. While those of Somali origin only represent 1% of the total citizenry of Sweden. Now, if you analyze this phenomena, you'd also find out that the percentage of people infected with the virus is very high in one of the capital's neighbors, amongst the Syriac community who have immigrated to Sweden from Iraq. Now, this phenomena of high rates of coronavirus victims among ethnic minorities is not limited to Sweden. We see it in African Americans in Chicago, for example, where they are 70% of the victims, while they are 30% of the population of the city. This also discrepancy in these ratios we see in many other cities in the United States, such Louisiana, New York, and others. And these shocking numbers prompted researchers to investigate why. In Sweden, the government has focused on spreading preventative information among citizens and relied on their awareness and adherence to this information. while continuing life as normal without closing commercial activity. This approach appeared to be relatively successful in containing the epidemic, but failed when it came to minorities, because the information issued by the government didn't arrive to the minorities with the same speed it was communicated to the rest of the populations, because many of them can't speak the official language, which is the language that the government used exclusively to spread those health information and instructions. Same results can be found with the Syriac community in Sweden. Briefly, and I will now look at analyzing this phenomenon. When the Sweden government, which is known for good governance, when it developed its policies to deal with corona, it looked at the Swedish population as one group and developed its policies accordingly. But its campaign failed to reach quickly and convincingly to those of Somali origins because of their language, or to the Syriac community from Iraq because they have a different customs, different cultural customs. And finally, the Swedish government realized the problem and developed this information in Somalia and communicated with the Somali community with it. However, it was too late by then, and many dozens or a large proportion of Somalis suffered. In brief, the variance in our cultures and ethnic groups, etc., was invisible to the governments, which tended to look at the minorities as either radical or something else. And the individual was stripped of many of their characteristics that are stemming from their social and cultural characteristics. So we need, post-corona, that governments adopt cultural governance. So services cannot be achieved to the population, to the citizenship, without recognizing their variance of needs and abilities. So why don't we cooperate with governments using social media so we can provide why don't we adopt what big international companies are doing, i.e. you rely on the information available in social media to target specifically individuals and groups. We are not all the same, we're not all equal. And we must recognize that each individual is an individual, has his own specificities, and communicating with that individual requires regard for that specificity, and that way this communication will be successful. And post-corona world requires this recognition of variance, and that recognition will make us more humane and will reduce the number of victims of all the crises we meet. Finally, I would like to speak about coronavirus and local and international solidarity. Corona has revealed the extent to which we are all, regardless of our religions, convictions, races, and our wealth, we are all passengers of one ship, as stated in the title of this forum. And His Eminence Sheikh Abdullah bin Baia has given an analysis of this idea. As he said, the passengers of the ship are different and they are all varied amongst themselves, but they are united by a pact based on their conviction that they will have no salvation, they will not escape their fate without adopting the spirit of solidarity, cooperation, and complementarity, and be governed by the values of compassion, love, tolerance, responsible freedom, and good governance. So instead of drowning together, due to the tensions related to our conflicting selfish and fractional and nationalistic and political interests, we must be aware that our individual interests
مصلحتنا المشتركة والخير العام.
Are in fact linked to the achievement and fulfillment of our common interests and our common goods. Today, along with our rulers, we all, and our religions, human beings should choose the good for the value on which their projects are built. The world post-corona should be a world of a new humanity freed of its selfishness and built on solidarity amongst its children, not on the level of religious communities or even country or nation, but on a global level for all humanity. The new humanity in the post-corona world requires that we complete our march of human civilization that has moved from meeting under the umbrella of racist states and moved on to the national states, and from there onto the nation states, and now we want to reach, in the post-corona world, we want to reach a state of citizenship that is inclusive of all diversity, and the United Nations true in its efforts to build justice for all. Thank you very much, brother and father, Dr. Fadi Dao. As a journalist, I'm very pleased to hear these contributions and to hear your words. We need a country, we need a state based on citizenship that includes everybody, of all-inclusive citizenship, in order to come out of our narrow views and to accept all and to respond positively with the calls for dialogue and for recognition that diversity is strength and is a wealth for all societies. Now I am pleased to ask Dr. Amina Houti to speak to us, but before she does, Dr. Amina, I would like to reintroduce you, because some people have just joined us. So I'd like to introduce Dr. Amina Al-Houti, the Executive Director of the Center for Dialogue and Work, and also head of the Center for Dialogue, Muslims and Jews in Cambridge, and author of Gems and Jewels, The Religions of Pakistan. And she has many, many other activities. Please go ahead, madam.
Shukran, brother. Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. In the name of the beloved, Al-Wadud, the Lord of mercy, the giver of mercy. Drawing upon the metaphor of the ship in a stormy world with wars, religious hatred, and the coronavirus pandemic, I want to share 3 projects with you which helped me learn about the diverse people that I studied and inspired me through the storms. Number 1 is Our Sirat, which is a textbook. So Our Sirat is a textbook by today's Muslim scholars, and I'm editing this book as the program director of the Sirat project of the Higher Education Commission in Pakistan. The Sirat, or message of the Prophet Muhammad Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, is to respect and show mercy to all peoples, especially to minorities. Scholars tell us how Rasulullah inspired a deep love and respect for the book, for all people, and above all for God, the Beloved, as all the prophets and saints did. The message of Rasulullah is central for people of faith and is relevant in today's violent world. For Muslims, he is central to identity. He is loved dearly, and Muslims are sensitive about his image even today. Through bridge building examples, I have witnessed that knowledge can turn hostilities into understanding and friendships, leading to respect for all people. Second, Gems and Jewels is an ethnographic reflection of 10 religious communities. It is commissioned by Isfanyar Bhandara, member of the minority faiths. Fieldwork across Pakistan challenged my own stereotypes. I learned about diverse Muslims, Christians, Jews, Buddhists, Sikhs, Hindus, Baha'is, Parsis, the Kalasha, and Jains. The religious communities, even impoverished, reflect courage and compassion. Every religious community stressed love for humanity and love for the divine. Love even your enemies, the followers of Jesus, Isa alayhi salam told me. I learned about the Sufi saint, Shah Abdul Latif Bhitai, and his stories of compassionate and passionate love for God, or what we may call Ishq-e-Ilahi. The 11th century inclusive Muslim saint scholar, Data Sahib, taught in his book, The Kashful Majub, that pain and tribulations, or bala, are the ornament and cradle of saints and nourishment of the prophets. In pain, there is shifa, the soul's cure, so cultivate patience, or sabrun jameel. While I recover from cancer this year and my world from the coronavirus, these values and stories from the Sirat and various faiths, which are like gems, have given me great healing strength, in addition to the love shown by my own special parents, family, and friends such as yourselves. The healing of the collective human mind, body, and spirit are interconnected. The coronavirus pandemic brought death and illness to us, leading our world to self-isolation, which is, in the words of one of the people I interviewed, a Ghare Hira moment, forcing us to meditate and reflect as Rasulullah did in the cave of light, or the mountain of Hira. Personally, I too aim to move from the fire of yearning or ishq to arriving and embracing my fellow humanity. Gems teaches us to listen and learn from diverse others, as we are all in one metaphoric ship. Third, through fieldwork and filming across the Muslim world, America, and Europe with Professor Akbar Ahmad, my great teacher and beloved father, and his team of American student researchers, I learned from Muslims, Christians, and Jews how to bring people together. As a leading researcher for Journey into Europe, I learned about the coexistence of humanity, convivencia in Spain, and benevolencia in Bosnia. But I also saw humanity's ugly face in the Nazi concentration camps for Jews in Dachau in Germany, and the slaughter camps for Muslims in Srebrenica in Bosnia. Based in fieldwork, these books are compulsory lessons from recent history. Studying the Quran 52 times, the Ahadith, the Sirah, the Torah, the Bible, and the biographies of the prophets, and beginning to learn about 10 religions have directed me towards the source, to adore beloved Rabbi. Love drives the human intellect and heart to become one with the message of ishq, or love. The beloved loves the muhsineen, the compassionate, the sabirin, the patient, the righteous, which reflects how belief and righteousness are inextricably interlinked. This virtual gathering of eminent scholars from across faiths is a coming together of intellect and spirituality to move from ideology and talk to righteous practical action in order to realize a new spirit. Here are suggestions for cultivating a new humanity, a new spirit. Each one of us must openly learn to know other perspectives, admit and overcome our own stereotypes about women, people of other faiths, and none. The forum may want to offer training workshops for the media to overcome labeling of an entire faith community. For example, there is an onslaught on Muslims and Islam, leading to Islamophobia. I am saddened to see the representation of Muslims and Islam in the media, and worried to see the misinterpretation of the spirit of Islam by its youth, as seen in the recent beheading of a teacher by an 18-year-old Muslim boy in France, leading to a cycle of revenge killings, in one incident of Muslim women and in another of Christian worshippers in a church. I see the media creating no bridges between the different perspectives. Islamophobia and confusion amongst the young needs to be addressed systematically. The true spirit of Islam needs to be understood by its youth. Terrorism must not be associated with any religion. The forum leaders could consider this year, inshallah, to assign a team to draw up a workbook of inclusive curriculum and list of resources virtually accessed by universities globally. Our youth can be taught that we can embody the ideals of our faiths and human rights values, compassion, empathy, inclusiveness, and mercy. They must rediscover the heroes and heroines from all faiths, emphasize shared values, and respect the dignity of difference. Encourage women overcome racism and understand the implication of being good global citizens. Cultivating whole people inspired by the divine spark, what Allama Iqbal called khudi, or Nietzsche called the Übermensch, or the idea of the Khalifa of the merciful God, is not easy. But the forum's minds can collectively lay the foundations and give our youth tools to make informed choices. History has proven when we invest in our youth to balance the knowledge of deen and dunya, humanity can reach heights of excellence. If the forum is successful in shaping and passing on ideas to the next generation, Imam al-Ghazali, Ibn al-Arabi, Maimonides, and Thomas Aquinas can be reborn. In conclusion, despite the stormy weather and deaths that coronavirus brought in 2020, the forum has given us hope by bringing us together once again, even virtually, to revive a global alliance and remind us of the best virtues of human beings in the ship of life. No one is excluded from the ship. All are welcome. Through your collective ideas and resources, I suggest we guide both the media and our youth towards inclusiveness and a global alliance, led by the captains of this ship, both the sheikhs, Sheikh bin Baya and Sheikh Nayan, and their wonderful teams, and the translators and everyone involved, and Brother Zishan, and of course yourselves. Let us combine our efforts to lead the future generations when the storm settles and our ship of humanity finally arrives, to safe shores warmed by the comfort of the light, which is Noor-e Ilahi. Thank you very much, and thank you all.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Dr. Houti. Terrorism should not be associated with any religion, indeed. Thank you again for your profound notes and recommendations. الحضور الكريم، هذه الأزمة فرصة نادرة لاكتشاف.
Ladies and gentlemen, this crisis is a good place for us to look at the good in ourselves and how we can restore our spirits, our free spirits that frees us from our selfishness. This is not impossible, in my opinion. I think that we can all start doing this. So we've all heard what we can do under the circumstances to see what we can all do together for the common good.
فرص وإمكانات صنع عالم أفضل. يتحدث في هذا المحور كل من الدكتور كيلي جيمس كلارك وفضيلة الدكتور طارق أوبرو. وأيضا بستأذن المتحدثين الكريمين بإعادة تقديم سريع لأني أعرف أن هناك عدد من الحضور لم يستمع لتقديمنا السابق. الدكتور كيلي جيمس كلارك، زميل أبحاث أول في معهد كوفمان بين الأديان بجامعة جراند فالي ستيت ميشيغان، وهو حاصل على الدكتوراه من جامعة نوتردام، وشغل مناصب بحثية في جامعات أكسفورد وسانت أندروز ونوتردام. أما فضيلة الدكتور طارق أوبرو هو إمام المسجد الجامع ببوردو ومفكر فرنسي معروف. يعرف فضيلة الإمام طارق بدوره البارز وتأثيره الإيجابي في الرأي العام المسلم في فرنسا وأوروبا من خلال أنشطته الريادية وكتاباته التي تدعو إلى صياغة تجديدية أو إلى صياغة تجديدية للخطاب الديني في سياق الجمهورية الفرنسية. ولعل من أشهر كتبه دعوة من أجل المصالحة. ورأينا وشاهدنا حوارات لافتة ومهمة ومبهرة إذا جاز التعبير لفضيلة الدكتور طارق أوبرو قبل الأحداث الأخيرة التي مؤسفة للأسف
the last sad events witnessed by France in the last few weeks and months. I invite Dr. Kelly James Clark now to give us his speech. Please, sir, the floor is yours.
Assalamu alaikum. I want to give thanks to our kind and distinguished hosts. I'm honored to be part of this important forum, and I regret that COVID prevents us from meeting each other face to face. My talk is primarily aimed at my fellow Americans. Like many whose work involved building bridges across wide divides, my life changed after 9/11. As a Christian, I was concerned that Americans, mostly fellow Christians, would focus their fears on all Arab Muslims. My concerns were soon realized with the unjustified invasion of Iraq, which resulted in the deaths of hundreds of thousands of innocent civilians. In the ensuing chaos, the Middle East was stabilized, and our injustice echoes to this day. So I enthusiastically commenced my new work, building bridges between Muslims and Christians on the one hand, and speaking out against Islamophobia to American Christians on the other. There was, however, a massive problem. I didn't know any Muslims. Since then, I've cultivated friendships with countless Muslims, some of whom I now consider my best friends. I've become friends with Fariel, a shipping magnate in Istanbul, who donates generously to famine relief, refugee health, and scholarships for needy college students. Mohammed, a physician from Syria who pays his own expenses to work in Syrian refugee camps for 2 months every year. Aziz, a Palestinian Israeli who uses tourism for peacemaking. You can read of his transformation from radical to peacemaker in our co-authored book, Strangers, Neighbors, Friends, Muslim, Christian, Jewish Reflections on Compassion and Peace. Ali is a doctor from Egypt who is a pioneering pediatric oncologist. Ali's grit and wisdom have saved countless children from near certain death. Ahmad and Zaina, who use their smarts and charisma to inspire thousands of Muslim young people to study and work in science and technology. And Rana, a world-class biologist who is working with Yale and Harvard scholars to study the epigenetics of suffering among Syrian refugees. As I was building these bridges and relationships, I was also reading from other Christians that Arabs are barbaric and that Islam is a religion of violence. If we can blame them for violence or for terrorism, we can then justify harming them by dehumanizing and scapegoating Arab Muslims. We rationalize our invasions of Iraq and Libya our indiscriminate drone policy, and our uncharitable and unjust treatment of refugees. Fear has also prevented many Christians from seeing Fariel, Muhammad, Aziz, Ali, Ahmad, Zaina, and Rana, and countless other Muslims as individual human beings like them with hopes and dreams for a better future. By seeing Arabs and Arab Muslims as less than fully human and unworthy of justice and compassion, we Americans, as an old battle hymn sings, loose the fateful lightning of God's terrible swift sword. Fear shuttered our hearts and closed our doors and dropped our bombs. In January and February of this year, a fear reared a new head, the coronavirus, creating fears of isolation and fears of financial ruin, fears of destroying the economy, and fear of even losing life itself. This new fear drove us to blame and scapegoat new others. When bad things happen, we want to know why it happened and who is to blame. The problem is this: bad things are happening because of COVID-19 for reasons we don't know, or maybe even for no reason. There's no why it happened, and there's no who to blame. There's just that pesky little virus. But there's little satisfaction in kicking a virus, just as there's little satisfaction in kicking a chair after it stubs one's toe. Yet just as we want to know who put that darn chair in our toes' way and punish them, we also want to know who put that darn virus in our way, and we want to punish them. So fear drove us into the nooks and crannies to search out who is at fault. But COVID-19 is not anyone's fault. It's not the fault of the Chinese. While it did originate in China, likely transferred from a bat, it could have originated anywhere. We should no more blame the country where the virus originated than we should blame the US for the 2009 swine flu or the much earlier Spanish flu, both of which likely originated in the United States. And while we dehumanize the Chinese as bat eaters, we, after all, eat factory farm meat and raw oysters. Blaming the Chinese has led to scapegoating Asians. Hate crimes towards Asians are surging in the US and around the world. But COVID-19 is not the fault of the Chinese. And it's not the fault of Donald Trump, the Republicans, the Democrats, Anthony Fauci, immigrants, Big Pharma, the Chinese military, the US military, the deep state, Jews, Bill Gates, Mexicans, Muslims, or the media, all of whom have been blamed in the United States for the virus. It's just an inexplicable, purposeless mutation. But fear of the inexplicable drives us to blame and to divide, and at precisely the time when we need to encourage and unite. One benefit of fearing an impersonal virus is that it has distracted us from our personal fear of Muslims. The virus's greater, more existentially pressing fear has left little room in our hearts for our more distant and receding fear of Islam and Muslims. But as vaccines dissipate our fear of the virus, our old fears will return. I see many people prophesying a hopeful post-COVID future. They claim that the compassion and self-restraint shown by mask wearers and social distancers, that the sense of unified purpose in developing viruses, that our global awareness that we're all in this together, and that our isolation-induced need for community will create a new and better post-COVID world. We'll emerge from the isolation of COVID, so say these prophets, more compassionate, and less selfish, more global and less parochial, more communal and less individualistic. Sadly, I don't share these hopes. Instead, I believe that as fear of the China virus recedes, our old familiar fears of Arab Muslims will fill the void left behind. Those fears will once again close our gates to Arab Muslims. We won't blame the Chinese for our wills, we'll blame the Muslims. The New Testament, which understands the deadly and powerful force of fear, says this: perfect love casts out all fear. I think its converse, fear casts out all love, is likewise true. And since none of us is a saint, fear casts out all love is vastly more prevalent. And when fear casts out love, we're on to division and even death. I don't optimistically foresee love casting out all fear in our post-COVID future, but I think it's our only hope. Our fears of one another will more certainly doom us than our fears of this virus. So we need to resist fear and inspire love. If after the ravages of the virus have receded, you find your unfounded fear of Muslims returning, again, I'm speaking to my fellow Americans. If you find your fear of Muslims returning, tell your better self that you do not want to be that kind of person. Choose instead love. You won't become instantly loving, of course. It never works that way. But you have to start somewhere. Start by avoiding those nooks and crannies that you know incite your fears. Turn off the fear mongers on the radio or television. Don't click on that juicy headline. And avoid reading those posts and tweets that just confirm your fears. Listen instead to inspiring music. Talk with people who look different from you. Donate money to those who have none. And read of love and courage and hope. There's enough to fear already for our economies and for our lives. Don't let false fears close the windows and lock the doors of your heart. We need to start letting love work on our fears now, when things seem the worst, so that we can work together later when things will be the worst, when the virus has wreaked all of its havoc, when the last person dies and is buried alone, and with our economies in shambles. We need to cultivate love now to overcome our fears now so we can face our new fears together and better. Let me be concrete. All or almost all love is local. I offer no prescription for world peace. But upon leaving this conference, I hope that love inspires you to open your doors, walk down the street, and invite someone quite different from yourself into your home for a meal and for some friendship. Let us courageously unite in casting out all fears, love, to work together in shared hopes and dreams for a better future. Shukran.
Thank you very much, Professor Clark. Indeed, we need more brave voices like yours nowadays. أعود إلى الدكتور طارق أوبرو.
I would like to take us
فضيلة
back to
الدكتور
Dr.
أوبرو
Tariq,
ليلقي
His
مشاركته
Excellency
معنا
Tariq
في
Obro,
هذه
to
الأمسية
share his
فليتفضل.
intervention with us today.
الحمد لله الذي رحمته وسعت العالمين والصلاة
May
والسلام
God's peace be upon you all.
رحمة للناس أجمعين. أولاً أقدم الشكر الجزيل.
First of all, I would like to express my gratitude for hosting me here. Thank you, Sheikh bin Baya, for inviting me. I'm really honored to be invited. I'm going to talk about the morals and about the faith at the same time. This is my approach. And I want to say that even though globalization is something that has existed for much longer, our globalization today is characterized by being very fast. And as is the case with any human reality, it has contradictions. It has the evil and the good. It has different aspects to it. And as people of faith, we need to believe in our destiny, whether or in fate, whether it is good or bad. And there are things that the human intellect cannot really fathom. A Muslim person finds that it is sufficient to have this belief, to believe in the fate, because sometimes our human brains cannot fathom why an evil event is happening. As to the morality, human beings have to accept the good and to develop it and try also to diminish the evil. And the Sharia, or the law, or the religious law, it aims to achieve just that. From a faith point of view, it is enough for a human being to accept that there is good and evil in our history. From a moral point of view or an ethical point of view, they need to work as much as possible to make the good bigger and the evil less. And it is not something that one individual or one group or community or nation to do on their own. Globalization has made us all members of the same organ. Things started getting intertwined, the economies, the communities, the faiths. So we are all citizens of the world. We all live in a global village. This intertwining of the different faiths and the different cultures and civilizations, this was helped by the fast transportation that we enjoy. Also, social media helped this intertwining a lot. So this made societies appear as if they are one society. So we are all living the same life and heading towards the same fate. There are two opposing movements that happened as a result. One is pushing humanity to stereotype behavior and to unify our patterns of consumption and civilizations. And at the same time, we find that people have become more individualistic and that they are beginning to shun communities, which is something that can threaten community peace and world peace. So as humans, it looks like we are heading towards being one unit, but at the same time, there is this opposing movement of becoming more individualistic. At the same time, there are people who want to reverse to their or to revert to their idea or image of the past. They want to shun technology, while there are those who want to adopt technology or are adopting it increasingly. So we have these opposing movements happening at the same time. Developments and advancement promised people that they will be living in a paradise on earth, but it did not succeed in making this a reality. So this led people to go back to spirituality. People want to revert to the old beliefs, to the way that their ancestors lived. We see this in some religious communities that become then more extreme. And they started adopting old beliefs. One of these beliefs is that God punishes people depending on what they do in this life. So they started interpreting pandemics and natural disasters in this context. Some of these disasters are not really natural disasters, they are man-made. If we look at pollution, for instance, that is something that is man-made. It is a result of industrialization. And as the Quran says, the corruption appeared on the land and in the sea because of human deeds. And the meaning here is that there is no punishment, there is no divine punishment for this. However, there is a cause and effect. There is always a result or a consequence of what we do. As to reward and punishment, this is something for the another life, for the afterlife. It is not for this life. We have other laws governing this life. And the hope, of course, is that people can learn from their mistakes when they meet or when they face the consequences of what they have done. When a human being has a negative impact on nature, they or the human being will reap the consequences of this. And if they do deal with nature in a good way, they will also benefit. Now we are looking at a new vaccine, and this vaccine was invented or was introduced because of the pandemic that we are facing. It is not something that happened on its own accord. It is a result of our work. Whatever crises that human beings have faced so far, they managed to overcome them. They managed to come out victorious. The crises are learning opportunities for us. This is how science developed. Even sinning is necessary because it helps people to repent and to renew their faith and to improve their ethics. So there are mistakes that are committed. It could be an intellectual mistake that could be fixed if one thinks more about their mistakes and learns from the lessons, or it could be a sin which is fixed by repentance. If God punished people for every single sin, then there wouldn't be a single human being on the face of this earth, as the Quran says. So there are laws and there are rules, and it is up to the human being to either benefit from these rules and laws or not. So humanity needs to stick together. Human beings need to stick together because we have the same fate. We are on board the same ship. So if this ship is punctured, all of us are going to sink together. So we as Muslims need to think of the others. How can we incorporate others in our faith? We have an old faith that was thinking only in within the limits or within the boundaries of that faith. However, we live now in an intertwined world. We have to communicate with one another. We need to look at developing new ethics and new ways of thinking that incorporates the other in our thinking and in our world, because now there are no boundaries between our civilizations, our cultures, or religions. We need to renew our thinking when it comes to faith. We need to think of what is the role of a non-Muslim in our faith. We need to renew our laws. We need to renew our faith if we are to live in peace together in the post-corona era. Thank you. Thank you very much, Dr. Tarek Obro. No doubt what you said was very important and very necessary. And this is very relevant to Muslim communities, especially the youth amongst them in Europe. You talked about the contradictions in this era of globalization. It includes those who want to progress and those who want to regress. I think this is a problem that is faced by many youth, young people who are cheated, and they are led to believe that there was a glorious past that they could regress to, something that they do not have much information about or all the parameters of. They are led to believe that there is an idealism that they could live in, something that is ideologies that are used to ensnare young people. So as you said, this was an imagined past that was used to lure young people into extremism. It was interesting for me to hear your comment or your call that we need to include the others in our thinking and that we need to renew our thinking in terms of faith. There are many people who might be thinking that, but they were not as vocal about it. Based on the tragic events that happened all over the world in terms of extremism, it is really important to look seriously into renewing our faith and making sure that there is no misunderstandings so that there are no groups that would abuse this and try to lure young people into extremism. We do need this kind of rhetoric. We do need people like you who issue such calls. That's why being in this forum is very important. We do not want these calls to be the result of a tragic event happening. We need to keep working on this independently. This would be the only way for us to face those who abuse religion or represent themselves as the true defenders of the faith or the true representatives of the faith. As a result, we have seen thousands of young people being lured into following such ideas and rhetoric, and this led to disasters. So we still have half an hour of discussion, but first I would like to pose questions sent by the viewers. And one of the questions is, one of the questions is, are we going to become more humble or more modest as a result of this pandemic, irrespective of how advanced have we become? So when we have a crisis, we might stick together and try to get out of the crisis, but then when we reach the safe shore, we might go back into fighting amongst each other. So then the question is, are we going to maintain that spirit of solidarity and modesty when we are out of this crisis, when we are out of the woods? So who would like to take over?
If I
السؤال مهم
may,
جدا ولكن قبل
it's a
الإجابة على السؤال
very
أود أن أشكر
important
أيضا كل المتحدثين
question.
استمتعت بالسماع أيضا
And
بالاستماع
before
إلى
answering
كلماتهم
it, I want to say I have
يعني
really
محق
immensely
الأخ أو
enjoyed
الأخت الذي
listening
طرح
to
هذا
all the
السؤال بأن
interventions.
التأثر غالبا ما يكون وقتي عابر
I want to answer
والسبب
the
في
question
ذلك
and
لأنه
say,
غالبا ما يكون
usually
عاطفي
we are
وردة الفعل العاطفية
reactional,
معروف
we
أنها
are
مؤقتة
impacted emotionally for a
ونعود إلى
very short
المواقف
period. And
والسلوكيات
then once the crisis
المستدامة
has
الأساسية في
elapsed, we
حياتنا
go
اليومية
back
لذلك
to our
الخطر
established
موجود
norms and
واقعي أن
behaviors.
تكون العاطفة اليوم
So
يعني هي التي تتحكم
it is a
بردة
danger
فعلنا
out there
وبمواقفنا
that
وأقوالنا
we
وغدا
are
عندما تعبر
controlled
هذه
by our
الجائحة نعود
emotions.
إلى ما
And
كنا
at the
عليه
moment,
وإلى
we feel
أنانياتنا
compelled
ربما
to do
وإلى
something about it
تصارعنا
because we're in the midst
ومنافستنا
of it. And then
ببعضنا
at the
البعض.
end, or after the
التحدي
end
هو
of the
في هذه
crisis, we
اللحظة أنا
return
برأيي
back
هذه
to
اللحظة
what we've always
المفصلية
been
بين
and done.
ما نعيشه اليوم من أزمة
I
وما
think
سوف
what
يأتي
we
ما
could
بعد هذه
hope
الأزمة
is
يعني عالم ما بعد
today,
كورونا
now we are in an
والتحدي
interval
يصطدم
between
دائما
the
القيادات أصحاب
pre-corona world and
المسؤولية
the
يعني
post-corona
أصحاب
world.
الرأي الذين يؤثرون
And I
في الرأي
hope that
العام لكي
those who
يقوموا
influence
بدورهم
public
اليوم أنا
opinion
برأيي
will
بشكل فعال
have to
ومكثف
do an important role today.
للسعي إلى إعادة
And this
النظر
is
في المواقف
to
وإعادة
reconsider
تحديد القيم كما
positions
تفضل
and
الدكتور برو أيضا
revisit
يعني
and
أن
redefine
نتمتع بالجرأة
values.
لكي
We
نعيد
should
النظر في
be
مواقفنا
daring, we
وفي
should be
قيمنا حتى
brave
نحن
and
كقيادات
reconsider and
وفي
revisit
خطابنا
our
أيضا
positions and
كان
our
الديني أو
discourse,
السياسي
whether
أو
be our
الثقافي
political or
ومن
cultural
ثم
or
ننتقل
religious
إلى
discourse. We
طرح
should be
هذا
brave to
الخطاب
revisit these
المتجدد على
discourses.
المستوى العام
And
للتأثير في الرأي
we
العام
should try and
ولإحداث تحول
influence
في
public
السلوكيات
opinion in
في
order to
مجتمعنا
change
وهذه مسؤولية
behavior in
خطيرة جدا
societies.
تقع على
This is
عاتقنا
such a
جميعا
grave
في هذه
task. It's
الأيام
a very
لذلك
big
إذا أردنا ألا
task, a
نفشل
very important
يجب أن
one.
نعبر من ردة الفعل العاطفية
We have
والكلام
to
الجميل
achieve
إلى
this task
جرأة
and go
المرافعة
beyond our
الذاتية
emotional
وإعادة
reactions
تكوين خطابنا
and
ومواقفنا
restructure
وإظهار
our
ذلك
discourse,
على الملأ
restructure
أمام
our
جماهيرنا
positions,
ونقل
and
هذا
show
الخطاب
this
إلى
in front
الجماهير
of the
والالتزام
people, in
معها
front of the
في
public,
حوار
hoping
يؤدي
that
إلى
this
تحول على
will
مستوى
influence
السلوكيات
them,
على أمل أن
will
يؤثر
change
ذلك أيضا
their
ليس فقط في
behavior,
المجال الديني
not
أنا أقول ذلك
only
أيضا في
in
المجال
terms of
الفكري العلمي
religion, but also
الأكاديمي
about
والسياسي
the
والثقافي أيضا
intellectual domain, the political domain, and also the
شكرا
cultural domain.
جزيلا دكتور الأب فادي
Thank
الضوء.
you, Dr.
لا أعرف
Fadi.
إذا أحد المشاركين الكرام يريد أن يعلق أيضا على هذا
I
الموضوع.
want
ربما
to
الدكتورة آمنة
ask
حوتي.
if any of our distinguished guests and participants would like to comment. Dr. Amina?
Yes, thank you very much. That's a very good question because as we know, especially Muslims, the Prophet Rasulullah once said, coming back from a battle, that we have come from the small battle and into the bigger battle, the Jihad al-Kabir. And you know that the Jihad al-Kabir is against ourselves, the ego. So the biggest battle is when we humans turn inward and we do the journey inward. The journey of the ship goes in our own and look within ourselves how to live our lives in a more humble way, where we give space to others, where we listen, where we reach out, where we respect. And I think that's why the coronavirus has been an important, almost devastating, but also an important moment where it's like Ghar-e Hira. It's a moment of reflection where Buddha sat under the Bodhi tree, Zoroaster went in the cave, Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam went to Ghar-e Hira. These are important moments for the world to reflect and meditate, because in the noise of the world and in the cacophony, we need to stop, we need to pause, and we need to think and reassess how we are going as humanity. And that helps. It's a helpful thing. So thank you for the question. It's a very valuable question. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Houti. Dr. Clark, would you like to comment on the same point?
I like the way Amina put it. We're leaving a small battle and entering a big battle, and that really was the point of my talk. That compared to our relationships with all of humanity and with God, compared to those things, fighting a coronavirus is next to nothing, really. And it's focused all of our attention. Our existential fears are all focused on it, and our ego will reassert in various ways later, and we'll come back and we need to do battle against ourself. And ourself wants to protect ourself, our beliefs, our fears. And honestly, I think we need to call on God to help us win that battle. They're just, but we need to know it's there. Lots of times we just let our fears move us this way or that. And we need to know the reason our fears are doing that is we don't trust God. We don't love other people. We're being selfish. There are all sorts of things that are sort of moving us this way and that. And we need to stop and self-consciously say, I'm taking on the jihad. God willing and God help me. God help us all. The bigger battle of the soul. So I think if we don't call on our richest spiritual resources at a time where I think selfishness is going to come swooping back in, we're going to like, oh, I didn't die. All my selfishness will come back. I get to go and do whatever I did before and more. And we need to resist that. God helping us. Thank you.
Thank you very much. فضيلة الدكتور طارق أوبرو، هل من تعليق على هذه الفكرة التي طرحناها؟
Dr. Tariq, may I ask you to share us with any comments you may have? It is the human nature to forget. Like our father Adam, where we're told he also forgot things on occasions. So this is our nature. We forget, we are weak, and suddenly we are faced with a crisis like the current one to remind us that we were born weak. These crises also remind us that we're ignorant, as God says that you only, and I'm paraphrasing, says the interpreter, in Quran it says you only know very little, God knows everything. So how do we benefit? How do we learn from the recognition that we are ignorant, we are weak, we are not ideal, we are not complete? We seek to improve, and we can only improve by attending to our ignorance, attending to our weaknesses, and thus such events like the current pandemic is an opportunity to make ourselves stronger, to make ourselves less ignorant. This is a motivation. It is an invitation for us to work on ourselves. We have to work to find the medicine, the vaccine. And this is what God has asked us to do on this earth. Thank you, sir. I have a number of questions still. We may not have time for all of them. One of the questions, however, says, will this crisis bridge the gap between the rich and the poor countries? And of course, we know that the crisis is also seen as an economic opportunity by some, and they don't possibly listen to what we're saying here today, and to them it's just an economic opportunity. It's an opportunity for greed, for making more profit, which always comes hand in hand with the crises. So will the current crisis enhance or promote equality between poor countries or rich countries, or will it exacerbate the gap between these countries? This is such a difficult question. We are unable to foresee how things will develop. We could talk about what we hope to see, how we would like things to happen. Of course, we have seen good positive signs in a number of meetings between major countries. For example, in the G20 meetings, there were positive signs, and superpowers were talking about relieving debts of developing countries, for example. This is a positive indication. However, we all know that the gap is massive. The gap between the rich and the poor countries is massive, and that this current crisis has affected countries differently. It has added to the challenges faced by each country differently. I think yes, to a degree, there's even an exasperation of the gap between the poor and the rich, even within the same country. And so it's not only a matter of a gap between countries themselves, the gap inside countries themselves are also getting deeper. Of course, while we want to maintain personal freedom and rights and preserve a lot of elements of our culture, but at the same time, we want to seek more social justice, more social equity. Perhaps to reach this, we need a more active role of the United Nations, for example, to promote cooperation between countries. To be brief, I'm going to give an example. There's a principle by the United Nations that says that 0.7% of countries' budgets should be allocated to helping other countries. And although different states are spending huge sums of money, even within their borders, because of the COVID pandemic, some countries now are refraining from allocating this very tiny percentage, the 0.7% of their budget. They are now refraining from this UN principle. They are no longer spending this money to help other developed countries. They are using the pandemic as a pretext to spend more within their borders. At the end of the day, all we can do is raise our voice, ask for more solidarity internationally, and also try and influence the public opinion, and try and raise awareness amongst people that social solidarity is to everybody's advantage. And we are only advanced and supreme when we realize that individual interests go hand in hand with the collective interests. Thank you, Dr.
Equality among nations will be always there. It has been always there. Will that create more trouble among religions, nations, people?
Can I say something? Oh. Can I say something here? Is that okay?
Yes, please go ahead. Maybe Dr.
Okay.
Yes.
Part of my work has been trying to explain to Americans that most of our disputes around the world have very little to do with religion, but they have a lot to do with land and autonomy and injustice, food. There are lots of reasons people fight. Very low on the list is religion, but religion gets blamed for it, especially in America. Islam. I think nobody exports more violence and terror around the world than Americans, but we don't blame Christianity. It's never blamed. In our borders, white Christian identifying men commit almost all the acts of terrorism. I think in the past 2 years, all of them, 100%. But we don't think Christianity is the problem. but we do with Islam. And I think part of what we need to do, or what I need to do, this is what I take as my task, is try to inform American Christians that it's not Islam that we're at battle with. It's not Muslims that we're in battle with. In fact, the people we so-called battle the people we fear want to live in a world with peace. They're like us. They want to they want a better world for their children. They don't want to worry about bombs falling around their head at night. They don't want to drop bombs on other people's children. And they're just human beings like the rest of us. That's why I mentioned, Zaina and Ali and Aziz by name. Meeting people and getting to know them by name, to me, is the best solution to Islamophobia, and honestly, to a lot of divisions that we have with one another. And so, anyway, it's just a long way for me to say, I think there will be some bad things happen. Some bad things will happen afterwards, because some people are going to be ignored and harmed. There will be injustices after. It will not be based on Islam or Christianity. I promise you that. Although Christianity and Islam might get blamed for it. Too bad. And what we who are working on peace in these areas need to do is to make sure that our message of peace and love that comes from our religions, that religions are getting credit for that. And we probably won't, and yet we still need to keep working on peace and love. It's not about getting credit. It's about making the world the way God wants it, a world of justice and love. And but we're not going to get much credit for it. Well, so be it. We need to keep doing our job. Thanks.
Thank you. Thank you. Dr. Amna Houti, do you hear me?
Yes, shukran, brother. Is this the same question, the previous one about different wealths, or is it same question? Well,
Yes.
I'd like to, yes, answer that. First of all, I'd like to say that, comment on Kelly James Clark's point. Thank you for your work, and I think that's a great point that you just raised. Then I would like to go on to your question, brother, and answer that with another reference to Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, because for Muslims, our primary source of identity comes from Rasulullah and from the Quran, which is God's word for us. So the Prophet said a very beautiful statement, which is that your neighbors 40 houses down to your right and 40 houses down to your left, they're part of your neighbors, and you must love and respect them. But I think that is also a metaphor, because people we live with, our neighbors, our people in the world, are also our brothers and sisters, and we've got to take that metaphor to feed the person next door, because as far as I remember, the Prophet said that nobody should go hungry next door in those houses. And that is exactly the point with the rich and the poor. If we reach out to the other, the so-called other, we're again doing the work of the divine, because it's a constant work of humility, of stepping back, trying to step in a position of humility and reach out to people less privileged, or people who don't have what we have. And therefore, we've got to constantly challenge each other. And that is the battle, that is the jihad, which I think is so misunderstood and which needs to be understood in these terms. Thank you, brother.
Thank you. Thank you. دكتور الآن أريد أن طبعا لدي كثير من الأسئلة ولكن
I have a lot of questions, but I would like to speak with Dr. Tariq. I know that you are requested quite a lot to comment on events in European media. And lately, you were talking about Islam in Europe specifically. And I want to be very frank. with regard to the renewal of religious rhetoric, you said very important statements, and that it is important to recreate our um, awareness of religion and of faith, especially among Muslim communities in Europe. These schools were launched and they are continuing. However, we hear louder voices from extremists, especially in the West. Is this a correct assessment, or is there another reality of Islam in the West? Personally, I think that extremism does not have a place in our future. We have witnessed several extremist schools of thought in Islamic history, but they did not persist. And whoever wants to survive has to be moderate, because extremism kills itself by itself. It may appear prominently at one point in time, but it soon disappears. The majority, the great majority of Muslims are moderate people. So if we look at the extremist sects, they only represent themselves. Most of Muslims, they maintain their tolerance and maintain their moderation. And I think that extremist voices are bound to disappear. However, we cannot rely on this and act with this in a passive manner. This is because the extremists were the cause of many people losing their lives. They were responsible for several killings. That's why we cannot stand still in front of such movements. Dr. Dao, Dr. Tariq is talking about other reasons other than religion for extremism in our part of the world. Why is that? Extremism is a complicated phenomenon and it has several roots. Sometimes some interpretations of religious rhetoric may be used in order to legitimize extremism, but it does not mean that extremism is a result of religious rhetoric. As to non-religious reasons for extremism, I think that in our Arab world, one of the problems is that we do not have a state based on citizenship. We do not have social justice, on the other hand, and this is something that greatly impacts on the situation in our part of the world, and that has an impact on extremism and extremist thought having a fertile soil to grow. So the injustice in our part of the world is the cause of many evils. There are those who benefit from extremist explanations or interpretations of religious ideas. They are trying to say to people that the solution is to malign the other and to launch or wage war against the other. That's unfortunate, but that is what we have witnessed in our part of the world. I hope that we will be able to put this behind us. However, this wave is expanding into Africa, and Africa is suffering as a result. We cannot face extremism unless we live in just countries that believe in citizenship for all. I don't want to go astray or go much further away from the topic of this session about the rebirth prospects for the post-corona world. However, there are situations that are quite worrying. And one of the issues that was discussed in the Arab media is the following. There are those who are blaming political institutions in the West
باسم الديمقراطية باسم حرية التعبير ولكنها أتاحت الفرصة لمنظمات
that made room for political Islam under the guise of freedom of expression or liberties. And this made space for these organizations to exercise their extremism and lure young Muslims in the West to participate in extremist activities in our part of the world. I don't know if Dr. Houti agrees with me here, but the floor is yours, madam.
Thank you, brother. Could you summarize that question once again, please? Brother, could you summarize that question once again?
I said there are so many people in my part of the world who are blaming the European governments for opening doors for the many Muslim extremists to express their extremist views, taking the freedom of a press and democracy as an excuse to express their extreme ideologies.
Thank you very much. Well, as I said in my talk, brother, I feel that there are two different conversations and two different ideologies. And there's no bridge between them. There is the public in the West, which is fed by news from the media. And often the media language towards Muslims specifically is very problematic. So when there is an incident, and usually the incidents are caused by young boys, unfortunately, as in this case in Paris, where an 18-year-old boy, now think of it, 18, he hasn't had the privilege of knowledge that great scholars and people who have taught and studied and all, he hasn't had that history. So he's very young, he's raw, he's responding. But he's also not connected to his imams or his, so again, there's a need for guidance, as I said, number one. And number two, there is the governments who talk about freedom of expression because they have had a very long, complex history of coming out of religion or the status quo or a certain way of doing things, and they sort of responding to that. So you have two different ideologies, but what we need are scholars, people like yourselves. We need people like this platform to come in and provide a sort of bridge of understanding, a bridge of reaching out, a bridge where we can say, look, this is the problem. This is part of the solution. Because obviously in Islam, there is no such thing as extremism. Extremism is injustice. In fact, the Quran clearly states, talking about all believers, not just Muslims, but all believers as people of the middle path, ummatan wasatan, the middle people. So the whole point is to struggle and to strive to come to a middle solution, a middle path where we live our lives in a thoughtful, reflective, a sensible middle path. And therefore, we need those bridges, and therefore interfaith work, therefore scholarship, therefore your work, therefore Sheikh bin Baya's work, therefore Sheikh Nayan's work becomes very important because they are the ones who are bringing in the scholars from all faiths and to some extent bridging that gap. But what my worry is that this work, what my concern would be, or my desire would be, that this work trickles down so that people in the media could be more informed and so that they too could help us provide that bridge. Thank you, brother.
Thank you very much, Dr. حوتي. لا أعرف إذا هناك أي تعليق لدى أي من المتحدثين قبل أن
I don't know if you have any other comments before we give the floor to Dr. Muhammad Abdu Zubair. Are there any last comments? Dr. Clark, go ahead.
This is no defense of the West. The media most people already fear people who are different from them. Muslims are different from most people. And then the media only has bad news about Muslims. And then language is problematic. It's totally problematic when it comes to Muslims. So we do need to educate the media. The sad thing is they're not going to start printing good news because people don't keep going back to news sources. This was my talk about nooks and crannies. People don't keep looking at websites if they have good news. They're looking for bad news. They're looking for people who fall down, and then they can laugh. And the media knows that. And the media is trying to sell advertising. They're trying to give us news, but they want us to read their pages and go back and back and back. We're only going to have good news. And that's why we do need to educate the media. I totally agree. But Dr. Amina's point is we need to build interfaith bridges. We need to get people to meet people because we are not going to win the media. It's a help, but you got to walk down the street. I brought people to the UAE. I brought scholars to the United Arab Emirates a few years ago, and we went to the big new beautiful mosque you have there. And they came from North America, Christian scholars, and they said, "Hey, this is the first time I've been in a mosque. It's really beautiful." And I think you can't walk down your street and meet a Muslim. You have to fly 3,000 miles to do this. And I didn't say that. I know you have to do that sometimes. And to me in America, the burden is on like Christians. It's our burden to show love. It's not, you don't need to prove yourself to us. You're human beings. But we need to prove ourselves because we have treated Muslims without compassion and without justice. And we need to do something in America. And to me, it's just trying to find ways to build those bridges with your neighbor 40 doors to your left and your neighbors 40 doors to your right.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Dr. Clark. أريد أن أدعو الدكتور محمد عبد الزبير.
So now I'm going to give the floor to Dr. Muhammad Abdu Zubair. I'm going to give the floor to Dr. Muhammad Abdu Zubair now, so the floor is yours.
بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله والصلاة والسلام على أشرف المرسلين صاحب الفضيلة أصحاب الفضيلة فاضل الفضيلة الشيخ العلامة عبد الله بن بية وأصحاب الفضيلة الحضور أحييكم هنا من جمهورية مالي من عاصمة جمهورية مالي باماكو حيث يتابع العلماء والباحثون هذا الملتقى الهام يتابعونه باهتمام كبير وعناية كبيرة جدا. وفي البداية باسمهم جميعا أود أن أقدم بالغ الشكر وعظيم الامتنان لدولة الإمارات العربية المتحدة على تكريمها لشيخنا الشيخ العلامة عبد الله بن بية في تعيينه في أكبر المناصب في الدولة.
We thank the UAE for appointing Sheikh bin Baya the head of the IFTA Council in the UAE. And we would also are congratulating Sheikh Mahfouz for being appointed as the Secretary General of the Forum for Promoting Peace in Muslim Societies, and we're very honored to hear this news. And this is especially an honor for all the nations and the states that are in Western Africa. It is a gesture that honors the countries in that part of the world for the Islamic Republic of Mauritania and Mali. Very frankly, I find it a bit awkward to take the floor after listening to such an auspicious elite and such speakers who spoke about the various topics that were part of our discussions in this 7th meeting. I just want to say to the Sheikh and the scholar Bin Baya that this giant ship that he gave us the outline of and that he also designed its body and skeleton will sail to the shores of safety under his captainship. All of us in the African continent. And please allow me to say that this will bring about stability in all parts of the world. And the most important values that will help us to deal with the coronavirus are those values that have been adopted by this forum, the values of solidarity, cooperation, and tolerance. And I have a suggestion that to include amongst the recommendations to set up a program that follows what happened after the Conference of Washington that was held in 2018 to feed 1 billion people in the world. And apart from this program, following or post-corona, I hope there would also be a possibility to give the vaccine to 500 million people, especially in the most needy countries and the vulnerable countries. This is my suggestion, and may God preserve and bless the United Arab Emirates, and peace be upon you all. Thank you to Dr. Muhammad Abdo as Zubair, the Secretary General of and one of the trustees of the Forum for Promoting Peace in Muslim Society. And I thank Sheikh Bin Baya for attending this session and speaking through it. It was an honor to listen to him, and his contribution was valuable. And I now address the contributors to this session and thank them profusely for contributing, as well as thanking all those who contributed with their comments and questions through social media. It was a very rich session indeed, and it will contribute to a new vision of a new humankind post-coronavirus. Thank you, and peace be upon you all. We thank Dr. Sulaiman Al-Hatlan for his wonderful stewardship of this session. And now we will play a video for
كرم معالي الشيخ نهيان بن مبارك آل نهيان وزير التسامح والتعايش ومعالي الشيخ عبد الله بن بية رئيس منتدى تعزيز السلم في المجتمعات المسلمة، رئيس مجلس الإمارات للإفتاء الشرعي، رئيس المجلس العلمي الأعلى لجامعة محمد بن زايد للعلوم الإنسانية، مكتب فخر الوطن الفائز بجائزة الإمام الحسن بن علي رضي الله عنه للسلم الدولية في دورتها السادسة 2020 التي يرعاها سمو الشيخ عبد الله بن زايد آل نهيان وزير الخارجية والتعاون الدولي. وجرى تسليم الجائزة أمس في مقر وزارة التسامح والتعايش بأبو ظبي إلى سعادة الدكتورة مها بركات مديرة مكتب فخر الوطن، وذلك ضمن فعاليات الملتقى السنوي السابع لمنتدى تعزيز السلم الذي يعقد افتراضيا في أبو ظبي.
والآن مع البيان الختامي لأعمال الملتقى السابع لمنتدى تعزيز السلم لسنة 2020، ويتلوه علينا سعادة الأستاذ خليفة مبارك الظاهري المدير التنفيذي لمنتدى تعزيز السلم في المجتمعات المسلمة، فليتفضل مشكورا.
الحمد لله رب العالمين، والصلاة والسلام على سيدنا محمد المبعوث رحمة للعالمين وعلى إخوانه من الأنبياء والمرسلين وعلى آله وصحبه أجمعين، وبعد. انطلاقا من قول الله عز وجل ولكل وجهة وموليها فاستبقوا الخيرات، ومن حديث أصحاب السفينة النبوية الرامز إلى المسؤولية المشتركة لمن جمعتهم وحدة الوجهة والمصير، عن سلامة الخيارات ووحدة القرارات، واستجابة للتحديات الوجودية التي تواجه الإنسانية جمعاء جراء وباء كوفيد-19 المستجد الذي غير برامج وخطط البشرية وعاد ترتيب أولوياتها وسائر توجهاتها القيمية، واستشرافا لإمكانيات تطوير قيم كونية أقرب إلى الإنصاف والتضامن والأخوة الإنسانية بروح جديدة هي روح ركاب السفينة، وتكاملا بين الجهود الميدانية الرائدة لدولة الإمارات العربية المتحدة على مستوى العمل التطوعي الإنساني والتضامن المجتمعي والدولي أثناء الأزمات عموما، وفي التصدي لهذا الوباء على المستويات الطبية والاقتصادية والإنسانية بوجه خاص، وبين مسؤولية التفكير والتنظير في مآلات الإنسان والعمران والأوطان في مرحلة ما بعد الوباء. وعطفا على المؤتمر الذي عقد في يوليو الماضي بالتعاون بين مجلس الإمارات للإفتاء الشرعي برئاسة معالي العلامة عبد الله بن بية ورابطة العالم الإسلامي تحت القيادة الملهمة لمعالي الشيخ الدكتور محمد بن عبد الكريم العيسى حول فقه الطوارئ والذي عالج الأزمة من النواحي الفقهية. انعقد بأبو ظبي الملتقى السنوي السابع لمنتدى تعزيز السلم حول قيم عالم ما بعد كورونا، التضامن وروح ركاب السفينة، من 22 إلى 24 من الربيع الثاني سنة 1442 هجريا الموافق من 7 إلى 9 ديسمبر 2020 برعاية كريمة متواصلة من سمو الشيخ عبد الله بن زايد آل نهيان وزير الخارجية والتعاون الدولي بدولة الإمارات العربية المتحدة حفظه الله، وبتشريف ومتابعة من معالي الشيخ نهيان بن مبارك آل نهيان وزير التسامح في دولة الإمارات العربية المتحدة، وبرئاسة معالي العلامة الشيخ عبد الله بن بية رئيس منتدى تعزيز السلم في المجتمعات المسلمة ورئيس مجلس الإمارات للإفتاء الشرعي. قد حظي الملتقى بمتابعة الآلاف من المشاهدين لجلساته وأعماله عبر منصته الإلكترونية ومواقع التواصل الاجتماعي، كما احتضن قرابة 50 مشاركا ما بين وزراء وممثلي منظمات أممية وسفراء وممثلي هيئات حكومية ومراكز ومنظمات دولية ومفتين وعلماء وقضاة وقيادات دينية ومفكرين وشخصيات أكاديمية ونواب برلمانيين وأطباء ورياضيين وغيرهم. وقد افتتح المؤتمر بكلمة بمعالي الشيخ نهيان بن مبارك آل نهيان وزير التسامح والتعايش بدولة الإمارات العربية المتحدة، حيث بين معاليه في كلمته ملامح رؤية دولة الإمارات العربية المتحدة القائمة على قيم التسامح والتعايش والتكافل والعدل وبذل الخير للجميع دون ما تمييز، مؤكدا أن هذه الرؤية لم تزل توجه مسيرة البلد منذ تأسيسه. كما شارك في الجلسة الافتتاحية أصحاب المعالي الشيخ الدكتور محمد عبد الكريم العيسى أمين عام رابطة العالم الإسلامي، والدكتور محمد مختار جمعة وزير الأوقاف المصري، والشيخ نور الحق قادري وزير الشؤون الدينية بباكستان، وسعادة السفير سام براونباك سفير الحريات الدينية وزارة الخارجية الأمريكية، ومعالي السيد ميغل أنخل الممثل السامي لتحالف الحضارات التابع للأمم المتحدة، وصاحب الغبطة جستون ويلبي رئيس الأساقفة الإنجيلية في المملكة المتحدة، والبروفيسورة ميليسيا روجرز المدير السابق لمكتب الشراكات الدينية في البيت الأبيض. وسلم معالي الشيخ نهيان بن مبارك آل نهيان وزير التسامح بدولة الإمارات العربية المتحدة، ومعالي الشيخ عبد الله بن بية رئيس منتدى تعزيز السلم حفظهم الله جائزة الإمام الحسن بن علي الدولية للسلم هذا العام بمكتب تقديرا ودعما لجهود أبطال الخطوط الأمامية الذين ضربوا أروع الأمثلة في التضحية والإيثار والتفاني في خدمة الوطن والدفاع عن حياة أبنائه والمقيمين فيه. وقد تدارس المشاركون في المحاور الثمانية لهذا الملتقى طبيعة وأبعاد الأزمة العالمية المترتبة على كوفيد-19 المستجد، ودور قيم التراحم والتضامن والتعاون وإشاعة السكينة في مواجهة هذا الوضع والتخفيف من آثاره وتداعياته، مسلطين الضوء على النقلة النوعية والقوة الاقتراحية التي يمثلها حلف الفضول الجديد بكونه يؤسس لنموذج متوازن من التسامح والحرية المسؤولة والمواطنة الإيجابية والاقتصاد المتضامن، بحيث يمكن أن يكون هو نموذج العقد الجديد، العقد الاجتماعي الجديد الذي ترنو إليه البشرية وتتطلع إليه. كما تطرق المشاركون إلى القضايا الفقهية المستجدة التي أثارتها هذه الأزمة على جميع الأصعدة من منظور فقه الطوارئ
from the perspective of the jurisprudence of emergency, which is based on Sharia realities and evidences in search of a way to facilitate the implementation of obligations in light of the existing crisis. Participants also examined positive models in dealing with the pandemic in the spirit of cooperation and solidarity in various fields such as developing vaccines, practicing religious rights, while preserving the safety of worshippers and also helping the
وخصصت الجلسة العلمية الأخيرة session
لآفاق عالم ما بعد was devoted to the prospects of the post-corona world and the opportunity of the birth of new human beings, the creation of a better world based on the spirit of the spirit of the ship passengers in their awareness of their shared responsibility and destiny. Participants in the Seventh Assembly of the Forum for Promoting Peace, after exchanging their views on the issues at hand, invoking the specificity of the global circumstances and the openness of the community, emphasized the following. First, in the nature of this crisis, the corona pandemic,
المستجد إن النتائج إن لهذه الأزمة فرادتها في العصر الحديث،
that this
لما امتازت به
crisis
من
is
شمول
unique
آثارها وتعدد تجلياتها بمجالات ومناحي الحياة المختلفة. إنها أزمة في ضمنها أزمات. تواجدت في هذه الأزمة الآثار الصحية بالاقتصادية والسياسية والنفسية والدينية والقيمية مرتبطة بعضها ببعض في شبكة من العلائق في غاية التركيب والتعقيد. إن مظاهر هذه الأزمة على تعددها يمكن النظر إليها ووصفها مجموعة من التجاذبات وجدت البشرية نفسها مطالبة بتدبيرها على نحو استعجالي. إن من بين أهم هذه التجاذبات التجاذب بين مقتضيات حفظ النفس البشرية ومتطلبات حفظ المال، وبين منطق البحث العلمي ومنطق السوق، وبين اليقين والشك، وبين العلماء والدولة الوطنية، وبين منطق الحريات ومنطق الواجب، وبين كلي النفس وكلي الدين. إن الأزمة وإن كانت في مبدئها أزمة صحية إلا أنها سرعان ما استحالت أزمة القيم. أزمة من النوع الذي يختبر أخلاقنا وقيمنا وإيماننا على التضامن ليس على مستوى الأفراد فقط وإنما على مستوى الدول أيضا. ثانياً، دروس هذه الأزمة والعبر المستخلصة منها. علمتنا هذه الأزمة دروساً وأشهدتنا حقائق منسية. أبانت
This crisis has taught us lessons and has shown us the fragility and weakness of the human condition. And has invited us all to be humble. Crises are an opportunity for review. And this pandemic has stopped our rapid pulse of life and gave us a unique opportunity to rethink and reassess. And we aspire that it will generate many opportunities on many levels for reform and for reconciliation. This crisis is an opportunity to humanity that must be seized to stop the current
ووضع السلاح امتثالا لدعوة العقل واستجابة لنداء العالم الذي أطلقته الأمم المتحدة وأولو بقية من العقلاء.
Launched by the United Nations and reasonable voices around the world. This crisis is an opportunity to crystallize a new vision that adjusts the balances in such a manner as to ensure that we have a more compassionate and just economic system that focuses on human beings and the development of life and invests in strengthening peace instead of the destructive war economies. This crisis has confirmed the impossibility of dispensing with the role of the nation state in preserving the vital interests of societies, especially in conditions of global crisis and disasters. They call upon us to strengthen our legislative and economic positions and capabilities. This crisis is a rare opportunity for us, mankind, to discover
الخير المطمور فينا، استعادة روح الإنسان المنطلق نحو المطلق المتحرر من قيود ذاته وحدود أنانيته، للتخلص من المنطق المعوج لصراع الخصوصيات. إن ميلاد إنسان جديد ليس أمرا مستحيلا ولا حلما أو ضوئيا، إذ نحن استطعنا أن نستخلص الدروس، ولكن هذا الميلاد لن يتحقق إلا بقدر ما تهيأ أسبابه اليوم. فما المستقبل إلا ثمرة للحاضر. لقد كشفت الأزمة الحالية للجميع قصور المقاربات الأنانية التي لا تثير وزن المشاركة وعجزها عن مواجهة خطر لا يفرق بين شعب أو شعب، بل يصيب الجميع على تنوع أعراقهم وتعدد نحلهم وأديانهم. أكدت هذه الأزمة المصير المشترك بين البشر، فلم نكن في يوم من الأيام أكثر ترابطا ولا تواصلا من اليوم. لقد هدمت هذه الجائحة كل نظريات الفصل أو التمييز على أساس العرق أو اللغة أو التنمية، وأثبتت أننا في نسق واحد مترابط بيئيا وصحيا واقتصاديا وثقافيا. إن هذا الترابط في الأوضاع والمصائر لا يقتصر على بني الإنسان، بل يتعداهم إلى أمم كثيرة من المخلوقات.
It is not limited to human beings, but also covers all creations with whom we share this world, and any imbalance in our environment affects us all. And this interconnectedness makes us inhabitants of this world.
الذي يشير إليهم الحديث النبوي فالسفينة
Reminds
الواحدة
us of the
ولو
spirit
كانت ذات
of the
درجات متفاوتة
ship, passengers
إلا
of the ship. It is
أنها
a
في
single
النهاية
ship,
محكومة
one level or the
بمسار
other,
واحد
different
ومحكوم
levels. We are
عليها
all
بمصير
governed by the
واحد
same destiny.
يتوقف على كيفية إدارة دفتها ودرجة الحرص على سلامتها.
And must be
إن الوعي بوحدة
directed
المسار
in a
والمصير
reasonable way. The
ينبغي
unity,
أن يثمر
the
روحا
awareness of the
تبعث على
unity of the path and
تبعث على
destiny
الفعل.
should
روحا هي روح
produce
ركاب
a spirit
السفينة
that
الذين
inspires action, the
يؤمنون
spirit of the
بالمسؤولية
ship's
المشتركة
passengers who all believe
وبالحرية
in their
المسؤولة
joint
وبواجب
responsibility
التضامن
and in their
والتعاون ويتخذونها
and their
منهجا.
responsible freedom and their
ثالثا
duty for
في مبادئ
solidarity.
وقيم روح ركاب السفينة إن المشاركين في هذا الملتقى
The participants in this forum foresee the possibilities of developing common university and universal values closer to equality with a new spirit, the ship's owners. The substance of this spirit is belief in the shared responsibility. As for its image, it is the solidarity and cooperation, and its goal is to preserve the universals expressed in the Hadith in its legal imperatives, which are the limits of God. The spirit of the ship's passenger entails a responsibility of the strong towards the weak, as well as the rich toward the poor, and the world towards the knowing towards the ignorant, and on the people of values towards other. The principles of responsibility and brotherhood in coexistence. The principle of responsible freedom should prevail on this ship, which does not violate the limits of others and does not lead to a breach of peace or disturbance to the overall order of the ship's passenger. Fourth, on the principle of implications of the spirit of the ship's passengers, the spirit of the ship's passengers call us to stop polluting the environment and to stop corruption of our land and seas, and orders us to stop wars immediately. This spirit requires us to practice forgiveness and compassion, so we love one another, whatever that may mean, which requires distributing vaccines to everyone without monopoly or exploitation, and for the rich to help the poor. The spirit of the ship's passengers calls upon us to create a development of a model that provides well-being, prosperity, and stability for all, a model in which the fruits of the mines are expanded for the benefits of our others, not monopolized by the rich or the strong, and a world in which nations compete for good and in which countries are proactive in providing Abrahamic hospitality to migrants and displaced persons. This spirit guides us to build societies of reassurance, societies in which security prevails, in which the spirit of fanaticism and sectarianism is transformed into a spirit of tolerance and love, in which the original dignity of every human being is preserved, that dignity which was given to all human beings, regardless of their race, color, language, and the life that was breathed into Adam by God the Almighty. In the spirit of the ship's passenger, we are guided to search for adaptations and accommodations, consensual solutions, compromises, and mutual concessions, which is the logic of coexistence. Thus, we achieve our times necessary mediation between the principles of freedom and responsibility. The spirit of the ship's passenger requires a universal awakening of our collective conscience to restore the effectiveness of the values of cooperation, solidarity, compassion, and introduce a new concept of humanity that goes beyond the neutral concept of human rights, that is of equality, and it evolves into a proactive concept based on values of virtue that gives the other the warmth and love and brotherhood. One of the drivers of optimism and hope for a better tomorrow is that this crisis stoked the flames of solidarity amongst human beings. We have seen a lot and we have heard a lot of examples, inspiring ones, of individuals who were able to transcend themselves to spread good and extend love to transcend the narrow calculations of policies and international relations, to adopt strategies that raise the ceiling of sympathy of human independence. Solidarity as a commitment to good of the others is a lofty state and goal that elevates human beings from the level of recognition, of the level of knowing one another, from the narrowness of the self to the common space, and from the fragmentation of the minority and precarious identities of the greater community. The spirit of the ship's passenger motivates us to elevate solidarity from empty formulas and marginal practices to which it has been reduced to today's market-based civilization, to reattach ourselves to compassion, which is a lofty goal about everything that brings us to ensuring the effectiveness and efficiency and provide us with a solid ground on which to stand. The spirit of the ship passenger has been strongly present in the UAE's vision and strategy for confronting the repercussions of this global crisis, and it has played a pioneering role in solidarity to benefit over 70 countries suffering from the pandemic. The noble objectives and focus of this role and these efforts was to provide relief for people as human beings first and foremost. The Alliance of Virtue, which was issued by the Forum of the Promotion for Peace in Muslim Societies and its partners last year in Abu Dhabi, represented the best conceptual and procedural embodiment of the spirit of the ship's passenger. It can provide a strong reference document for this new start, thanks to the inclusive values of all the common belief that people of every creed and race and background could live happily. The values of which the charter of this new alliance of values is based continue to provide guidance and propose solutions for the world, especially in the difficult crisis we are facing because of COVID-19. The new alliance of virtues could be the model for the new social contract that humanity aspires for. It embodies the spirit of the ship's passengers in terms of faith in the commonalities, prioritizing human dignity and going beyond rights to enshrine mercy, solidarity, and giving. It is as it is after the humanity, as it has done after the Second World War, can turn this crisis into an opportunity for beginning with a new vision of the world, a chance for the birth of a new human being which is based on values. Any delay in taking the initiative to act in a timely manner holds the future of humanity hostage and makes future generations captive to processes that they will be beyond control. Secondly, the recommendations. The participants recommend the following, and they want to praise the efforts of the Forum for promoting Muslim societies and extending bridges within the reasonable and wise aim of all religions. They praised the sublime contents of the Mecca document, which aimed to build bridges of love and human harmony, spread the culture of coexistence and tolerance, and confront speeches of incitement and violence. The conference commended and recommended the sacrifices of the medical staff and their dedication in saving lives, treating all and caring for the patients to fight this scourge. The participants recommended the following: working on drafting a draft agreement under the name of the Global Charter for Human Solidarity, with the aim of being to present the United Nations to ensure the achievement of the value of the post-corona world and to prevent the regress of the human being. Calling on the international community and the rich countries to show solidarity with the poor countries and to include them in scientific research and distribute vaccines to everyone without monopoly or exploitation. Encouraging initiatives and innovation in the field of public health technology and medicines in poor and developing countries, some of which have shown unexpected qualification to remedying the shortage of means and equipment. Establishing a unified international fund for emergencies, disasters, and crises. Establishing partnerships between decision makers and intellectuals and religious figures to spread discourse of peace, love, and human brotherhood, and to stand up to the discourse of extremism and incitement. Coordinate the efforts of religious leaders, the media, and those who influence public opinions, and specialists such as doctors, epidemiologists, to confront rumors and misconceptions. Encouraging official religious bodies and jurisprudence councils to reach rulings on the emerging issues in order to achieve the desired interests. Encourage and urge the civil society to continue efforts to express gratitude, thanks, and loyalty to those in front lines facing the pandemic, and to create more social situation and symbolic expressions of inspired by the culture of the society. The importance of continuing all precautionary and preventative measures until the agony subsides and the crisis ends. The conference appreciates that there is a need in the current circumstances for humanitarian momentum and stance, which the global conscience is directed towards observing the unity of the human destiny in many major issues. And the participants in the 7th Forum of the Forum for Promoting Peace in Muslim Societies would like to express their sincere thanks to and praise to the United Arab Emirates for facilitating the convening of the forum in the usual time and the usual level to the best available means in these exceptional circumstances, and to raise the highest feelings of gratitude to His Highness Sheikh Khalifa bin Zayed Al Nahyan, President of the State. May God protect and bless him in his life, and His Highness Sheikh Mohammed bin Rashid Al Maktoum, Vice President, Prime Minister, and the ruler of Abu Dhabi, and His Highness Sheikh Mohammed bin Zayed Al Nahyan, Crown Prince of Abu Dhabi, Deputy Supreme Commander of the Armed Forces, and the Chairman of the Executive Council of the Emirates, and to Their Highness Rulers Emirates. May protect them all. The participant of this forum pray to God the Almighty to include the greatest mercy and generosity Sheikh Zayed bin Sultan Al Nahyan, who was a haven in crises near and far, and for the United Arab Emirates to perpetuate the blessings of the upper hand and protect it from the evil of every epidemic. Thanks be to God and grace be to God. Thank you for the recommendations that were read just now. And we, at the end of this forum, pray to God that the UAE would remain as the beacon of peace, where peacemakers and peace lovers could meet. We leave you on another promise, only to meet again on the 8th meeting next year. God willing, we hope that the ships will reach the shores of safety. May God and peace blessing be upon you.